A freezing winter night. A poor young woman with barely enough food for herself opened her cabin door to a homeless cowboy carrying his shivering little boy. She expected them to leave by sunrise, but what the cowboy did the very next morning left her, and the entire frontier, completely speechless. Stay until the end, because this unforgettable Wild West story proves that one night of kindness can change a lifetime forever. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming Wild West stories, where compassion always finds its reward. The first heavy snow of winter had swallowed the mountain trails long before sunset. Fierce winds swept across the pine-covered hills, rattling every loose board on the tiny log cabin that stood alone beside a frozen creek. Inside, 24-year-old Emily sat near her crackling fireplace, carefully stirring the last pot of venison stew she had managed to stretch over 3 days. Life had never been easy. After losing both her parents to sickness and watching creditors seize nearly everything they owned, she had survived only because she refused to surrender. Every log she chopped, every trap she checked, and every loaf of bread she baked reminded her that honest work could keep a person alive. But only barely. She glanced toward the nearly empty shelf beside the fireplace. One loaf of coarse bread, a handful of dried beans, a few potatoes. That was all she possessed until spring. Just then, a sharp knock echoed through the cabin. Emily froze. Nobody visited this far into the mountains during a snowstorm. She reached for the old shotgun resting beside the door. Another knock came, this one weaker than before. Slowly she pulled the door open. A blast of icy wind rushed inside. Standing there was a tall, exhausted cowboy wrapped in a snow-covered coat. His beard was coated with frost, and exhaustion filled his tired blue eyes. In his arms rested a small boy no older than 6, bundled beneath a worn blanket and trembling so violently his tiny teeth chattered. The man lowered his hat respectfully. "I'm sorry to trouble you, ma'am," he said quietly. "My son and I have nowhere left to go. We don't need much, just one warm night." Emily looked at the child. His lips had turned pale from the cold. The little boy tried to smile despite his fear. Her heart broke instantly. She stepped aside without another question. "Come inside." The warmth from the fireplace wrapped around them immediately. The boy sighed with relief. The cowboy carefully laid him beside the fire before removing his soaked gloves. "I'm Jacob," he said softly. "This is my son, Samuel." Emily simply nodded. "I'm Emily." Without saying another word, she quietly divided her tiny pot of stew into 3 bowls. Jacob noticed immediately. "You shouldn't," he whispered. "That's all you've got." Emily smiled gently. "Food does no good sitting in a pot while children go hungry." Samuel eagerly ate every spoonful. His little cheeks slowly regained their color. Jacob could barely swallow his own meal. Not because of hunger, because of gratitude. Later that evening, Emily spread her own blankets across the floor for the boy while she slept beside the fireplace using only her old wool coat. Jacob protested. "You'll freeze." Emily smiled. "I've survived colder nights." Outside, snow continued falling beneath a sky filled with silent stars. Inside that humble cabin, 3 strangers shared the only warmth any of them possessed. Long after Emily had fallen asleep, Jacob quietly stared into the glowing fire. He looked around the tiny cabin. The patched walls, the empty pantry, the worn furniture. She truly had almost nothing. Yet she had given everything. Holding his sleeping son close, Jacob made himself a silent promise. "If God gives me one more chance, I'll never forget this night." Morning arrived with a blanket of fresh snow sparkling beneath the pale winter sun. Emily awoke before dawn, quietly adding another log to the fireplace before preparing a simple breakfast from the little food she had left. She sliced the final pieces of bread and warmed the remaining stew, pretending not to notice that her own portion was the smallest. Samuel's laughter soon filled the cabin as he watched snowflakes drift past the frosted window, the fear from the previous night already beginning to fade. Jacob stood silently near the doorway, watching Emily work. Every movement she made spoke of sacrifice. She expected nothing in return. Not money, not praise, not even thanks. She simply believed no child should suffer if she could prevent it. After breakfast, Jacob carefully folded the blankets and prepared to leave. You've already done more than enough, he said quietly. I won't take another day from you. Emily smiled. I only wish I could have offered more. Samuel suddenly ran over and hugged her tightly around the waist. Thank you, he whispered. Nobody's been this kind to us. Emily knelt and brushed the snow from his little coat. You take care of your father. The boy nodded. Jacob tipped his weathered hat. I won't forget your kindness. Within minutes, the two travelers disappeared into the snowy pine forest, leaving only footprints that slowly vanished beneath fresh falling snow. Emily watched until they were gone. Then she returned to her ordinary life. She chopped firewood, fetched water from the frozen creek, patched another hole in her leaking roof. She never imagined she would see the cowboy again. 3 days later, the peaceful silence of the mountains was broken by the sound of horses climbing the narrow trail. Emily stepped outside, her eyes widened. Nearly a dozen wagons slowly approached her cabin. Several riders followed behind them. At the front rode Jacob. Only this time, he looked nothing like the exhausted homeless traveler she had welcomed. His clothes were clean. His horse was strong. Behind him rode respected ranchers, merchants, and the local sheriff. Emily stood speechless. Jacob dismounted and smiled. I owe you an apology. She stared in confusion. I don't understand. He looked toward the tiny cabin. The night I came here, I wasn't lying about losing everything. My ranch had burned to the ground. My cattle were stolen. My son and I had nowhere to sleep. But I didn't tell you who I was. Emily remained silent. Jay continued. My family owns one of the largest cattle spreads in this territory. The sheriff recovered the stolen herd 2 days after we left. The insurance money finally arrived. My friends helped rebuild everything. He paused. But none of that matters compared to what you gave us. Emily shook her head. I only shared one meal. Jacob smiled warmly. No, you shared hope. He turned toward the wagons. The men immediately began unloading supplies. Flour, sugar, blankets, tools, seeds, furniture, firewood, barrels of food, even lumber for repairing the cabin. Emily's hands covered her mouth. I can't accept all this. Jacob gently replied, then accept it for Samuel. She looked confused. Jacob smiled at his son. He hasn't stopped talking about the brave woman who saved his life. The little boy ran into her arms once again. This is our thank you, he whispered. But Jacob wasn't finished. Not even close, because the greatest surprise was still waiting for her. Emily stood in tears as the wagons unloaded enough supplies to keep her warm through the entire winter. She tried again to refuse, but Jacob gently smiled. You gave a stranger your last meal and your only bed, he said. Please don't take away my chance to return your kindness. The sheriff stepped forward and handed Emily a folded document. An elderly rancher in the next valley had recently passed away without heirs, and years earlier he had owed Jacob's late father a great debt. Instead of keeping the land, Jacob had legally transferred 20 fertile acres to Emily's name, along with 2 horses, a milk cow, chickens, and enough seed to begin a new life. Emily was speechless. No one has ever done something like this for me. Jacob quietly replied, You did it first. Over the following months, Jacob and Samuel visited often, helping repair the little cabin, build a sturdy barn, and fence the property. Emily cooked hearty meals while laughter slowly replaced the silence that had once filled the lonely homestead. Samuel called her his best friend, and before long, she became the motherly figure he had missed for so long. When spring covered the valley with wildflowers, Jacob stood beside the blooming garden and looked into Emily's eyes. You opened your door when everyone else would have closed theirs, he said softly. Would you open your heart one more time and build a family with us? With tears of joy, Emily whispered, Yes. That autumn, the little mountain church overflowed with smiling neighbors as Jacob and Emily were married. Samuel proudly stood between them, holding both their hands as they became a real family. People across the frontier often told the story of the poor young woman who gave away her warmth to strangers on a freezing night. They always ended it the same way. One night of kindness created a lifetime of blessings. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes that kindness can change the world. We'll see you in the next Wild West story.